Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast, your guide to help you manage life, money, and multiples. Each episode, host Paul Fenner, Tama Capital's president and founder, and the proud parent of 4 amazing children, including 1 set of triplets, will provide insights on successfully sustaining an active lifestyle, career, and family through comprehensive wealth management strategies, financial education, and lifestyle planning, specific to parents raising twins, triplets, and more. Learn more, subscribe to the show, or connect with Paul at tamacapital.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of TAMA may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
80% of jobs come from networking, and 80% of those jobs come from a third-level connection, a friend of a friend of a friend. Then why is it that 95% of people struggle with networking? Someone who knows a great deal about the human side of networking is Rich Spriggle, a net giver focused on meaningful work, helping people who are between successes. Rich is a senior vice president at Challenger Gray and Christmas, where he supports individuals going through a career transition, one of the most traumatic life experiences that you can go through. Trust me, I know firsthand. Rich talks about his firsthand experience in going through his own career transition, which helped lead him to do something more meaningful with his career. Rich provides actionable strategies to network more effectively now, during, and after a career transition. Please enjoy my conversation with Rich Spriggle. Rich, tell us a little bit about the type of work that you do with Challenger Gray and Christman. So that's question number 1. And then a follow-up is I want to get into your story on how you ended up in your current line of work.
So how did I arrive at Challenger Gray and Christmas? First of all, it sounds like a law firm, doesn't it?
It does.
But I learned from someone a great way to explain it. So people say, well, what do you do? A lot of people aren't familiar with outplacement. And even the word outplacement sounds a little bit like outhouse, outback, and the like. But what we really do is work with people that are in between successes to help them find their way. Okay, so what does that mean? Challenger Gray and Christmas is a company that's actually started the outplacement business a little over 60 years ago. And we work for companies that are letting people go. And when people leave a company, it's traumatic. It's one of the 5 life events we think of. We think of birth, death, marriage, divorce, and the loss of a job. Okay, so this is really an emotional event. And what we do is we meet people as soon as we can after they've been told about this change. And our first message is to try to let them know they're not alone, and that that we are there to help them first get over the shock. And losing a job is like a mourning process. First, you're shocked, then you're angry to some extent, and then you go through this process of just trying to get through it to the point where you can rationalize to yourself that there is life after this company. And then you're open and being ready to go forward. And so my role is to be the first one to talk to them, to help them through that emotion, and then to get them started in the process. And then we help them get ready for the journey, meaning we help them. We have a team of resume writers, a team of LinkedIn experts. We have a full staff of job coaches that are with us an average of 7 years. So we help them get ready for the search, and then they each have an individual coach that's matched to them to help them go on that journey. So that may be a little bit longer, but at least it puts in perspective what we do. And I think the key to what we do is we make it very about the individual. We have this toolkit of tools, but we don't try to apply all the tools. We try to get to know the individual and help them with the tools that they need most to go forward. We think we have a pretty good process because we survey our clients along the way. And the last survey that we do with them is we ask them a question, one of the questions, which is based on your own definition, is your new job as good, better or worse than your last job. And even through this pandemic, the last quarter, 95% of our clients said by their own definition, their new job is as good or better than their last job. And we think that's a good surrogate for how we're doing. So we believe we have a process that works if you work the process. Okay?
So we'll get into our own stories, but full disclosure for the audience, this is how you and I met a little over 5 years
Absolutely.
ago. I was going through a transition, and I think you hit it on the head with the 5 major life transitions, losing a job, death of a loved one, marriage, birth. It's a very traumatic experience. And especially for, I think, the type of people that you work with, which are managers or, higher levels, VPs, presidents, their whole life, I think a lot of us identify our lives are wrapped around and are identified with our career. And when that is suddenly taken away from you, it's a shock. It's a shock to your system. I know at least it was for me. And, I was kind of apprehensive about the whole outplacement service that you guys were offering, and like, well, do I really need it? And I remember the first time that we met, we sat down, we had lunch up in, your office or in Southfield Towers. And I'll never forget that. And I think that goes to one of the points that you were making, is that you try to get a hold of people as fast as you can. You want to elaborate like why you do that and why it's so important?
Sure. It's because of, many people have been with a company for quite some time. And as you said, that you spend more time at your job with the people you work with than you spend with your family. And in many cases, if you count sleep, okay. So this is that separation. It's an event from the sense of a lot of times it's your life. These are your best friends, and you feel like you are being pushed out. So the emotional part of that, and then for most of the people we work with, they have about 70% of their wealth tied up around the company in the sense of 401k, pension, or stock, or those kinds of things. So it's an emotional loss, and it's a financial loss. So it's really important to communicate, to let those folks like you in this case know you're not alone. And for 2 things. One is you're not alone in the sense that even though the company had to make a difficult decision to eliminate your position, it doesn't mean they don't care about you as an individual. And they want to invest in having someone, in this case, like us, to be there to help you go forward. So it's to help you through that emotional and that financial. And the other point that's important is, this did happen to you, but with your family and friends, it also impacts them. So when they ask you, maybe in your case, Paul, how are you doing? They generally mean it. But as you talk to them about how you're doing, in their mind, the next point is, well, how does that affect me? Are we going to have to move? Are we going to be able to pay the bills? So helping that individual, in this case, you at that time, feel better about, your future and the way that you're going, and to try to look at this as an opportunity, to try to turn this negative into a breath that says, you know what? I'm going to have a chance to take some time through some amount of severance. The company is going to cover me trying to find my way next. And to use this as an opportunity, like you did, as you maybe at some point will share your story, to use it as an opportunity to do something that if you were continuing to work, you probably wouldn't have done for quite some time. So we try to turn this perceived negative into an opportunity. And when I tell people 95% of the folks we work with find a job as good or better than their last job, you can just see 100 pounds going off their shoulders. Like, really? It doesn't have to be a negative?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot to unpack there. So where I want to go next with that is the unique process that you have, in that, here I was in a job surrounded by all my coworkers who were close to me, and now they're gone. And one of the really unique things and great things about working with you was that you would bring the group of people in transition together once every week, once every couple weeks in this really great forum. And what I really learned about that was here are all these other people in similar situations to me that I could talk to, and that whole feeling of not alone and really relying on that group. And there are some people that are in that group that was in that group with me over 5 years ago that have become lifelong friends. And a few of them have actually become, TAMA family office clients, which is great. But to your point, there was only so many things that I could talk to my wife, Teresa, about. Like you feel like when going through it, like I didn't want to overwhelm or burden her anymore. And so there were certain things that I just, you didn't want to, talk about, but you could talk about it with somebody else in that group because they were going through the same thing. And it was never a pity party. That was the one thing I learned really quick. And I learned this from Donna Shelby, Donna is like, okay, you could have your 5 minutes of pity, and you've said this too. And then, okay, let's put the tears away and let's get on with life and figure out what we're doing next. And that was the great thing about the group, is that we would hold each other accountable. And when we saw somebody going down a dark path, for lack of a better term, we would have the ability to grab them and say, okay, listen, we got to get the ship righted.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I think is important. And as I talk to you, Paul, the way I was exposed to Challenger was first when I was in HR, I used them for people that were leaving the company. And then when it was my turn to leave, so to speak, I went through the Challenger process. So as I talk about this, it's not from some sales wonk that read a book about it. It's from someone who was in their 50s, whenever this happened. And I had been with this company for 29 years, so a long time. So for me, it was a challenge. But what I found, like you, was to have a safe place to talk, because your family and your family is going to play off of you. They're worried about you. They're concerned about themselves. So for me, having a coach in this case, and as you mentioned, a networking group was a safe place for me to kind of dump my bucket. If I could just get it out, and just hearing me speak it was tremendous. And then having some folks that would listen was wonderful, so that when I talked to my family about it, all the emotion was gone. And I could say, hey, I had a tough day. I was the first loser, in this job, or I came in second. I was the first loser. But you know what? I got that far in the process, which means there's some good things going on. So I feel good about where we're going. So whether you're working with a company, whether you're working with Challenger or another outplacement company, or you're going the path alone, the key is to put yourself out there, and it's to connect with people and to find networking groups. There are all kinds of groups like the one that we do with our clients that are for other individuals that are functional. And some churches have those kinds of groups. And sometimes they have them by the kinds of jobs that you're looking for. But the key is don't go it alone. It's tough enough from that sense, but you will feel so much better, because I know when I was in transition, I felt like I was taking all the time. So anytime I had an opportunity to share and to help somebody else along the way, I felt better about myself.
Yeah, I know one of the books that you turned me on to, The Go-Giver, is a tremendous read, and we'll link to that in our show notes. And that actually came up in my podcast episode with Terry Bean, who's well known in the areas for networking and LinkedIn. And actually Bob Berg, who's one of the authors, his birthday was just a week or so ago. So it was ironic that we were bringing him up. But if we transition into networking for a minute, What are the, obviously you could talk about the group that you have, but for those that, aren't going through or don't have access to, a job placement service like a Challenger, what are some of those groups that people can get involved in?
Yeah. So maybe if you don't mind, if I could just tee that up a little bit.
Sure.
I think generally people know networking is important. But statistically, 80% of the jobs come from networking. Okay? 80% of the jobs come from networking. Of that 80% of those jobs come from the third level down in your network, meaning friends and family of your friends and families, friends and family. Or translated into my version of street English, people you don't know today. Okay, so the key here is not just to reach out to the people you know and ask them for some guidance, but it's to ask them to connect you to their network. And then as you reach out to their network, I would say, Paul Fenner referred me to you, and I would even put that in the subject line of the email if I sent them an email instead of call, and then I would talk to them from that sense. So I would use my connection with you because people are busy, but they still care. So if you have some connection to them, they're more likely to respond. I'll tell you a quick story if you don't mind. One of my clients went in and got a list of the top 100 recruiting firms, and he sent a note to them, and he remembered what I told him about putting a name in the subject line. And in every one of those, I guess he sent 50 notes out. In every one of those notes, he put in the subject line, referred by Rich Spriggle, and he said he got like 35 responses. I know I only knew 5 or 10 of those people, but they're going, geez, there must be somebody I know, so let me respond back. So the power of the connection is huge. So that networking is really important. Most people would say to me, Rich, I'm terrible at networking. Well, guess what? That makes you no worse than anyone else. 95% of the people of us are not good at networking. About 3% are, and the other 2 that think they aren't connected with themselves. Okay, so it's not easy, but you can learn. It's not innate. And one of the ways you learn, Paul, as you know, is by connecting with other people that are also in transition. Not to have a pity party, but to open your network to them and to have them open their network to you. So there are groups, a lot of churches. If you check with your church, a lot of churches have sponsor groups. A lot of churches open themselves up to groups. There's a group in Toledo that every Friday morning meet in a church. And they have people from the break room to the boardroom that come. And they are tremendous at helping each other. In the Detroit area, there's a group that's now called Transition Cafe that's led by Mark Corey and Priscilla Archangel. What a great name.
She's a fabulous lady too.
Absolutely. They meet, of course, now virtually every month, and it's a group of multifunctional people that get together to help each other. So each meeting, there's a few minutes of networking before it gets started. Then everybody has a chance to stand up and speak about themselves for a minute or so. And then people can get to know them. If they know people and companies that can help them afterwards, they can do that. And then there's a subject, and then networking at the end. And what I always tell people that I talk to is one of the things you want to have is a business card, because we associate from a business standpoint a lot. Think about it. What is one of the first things you do is you give them your card. And a lot of people, when they're in transition, when someone gives them their card, they don't know what to do. It's like, I don't belong anywhere. So I always tell folks, create a card, put 4 things on the card: your name, your phone number, your email address, and the URL to your LinkedIn profile. You can put anything else you want on it. You can put financial executive, finding my way, anything you want, but those 4 things are important. So then when you meet somebody, you have a chance. If they give you your card, you can give it to them. If they don't, and you want their card, you can say, may I give you my card? And their reaction is going to be naturally to give you theirs. And what you're doing is when you're talking to somebody, typically you're the most important thing. But after that conversation, you and they move on. So by leaving them with your card, there's a chance you have something to remember you by. And then within 24 hours, you used to send that person a note, thanking them for the time, reflecting something personal that you talked about. We both used to work at the same company. We both dislike Michigan State or Michigan or whatever that might be. And then they ask, would you have a few minutes for a cup of coffee? So those networking events are important. And Mark and Priscilla have that. There's also functional networking groups that are around the area and that are local. Some for IT. There's an HR networking group for HR people called Between Successes, led by an amazing lady, Gail Sanderson, and she has some folks that do a tremendous job of supporting her that love what they do. So there's all kinds of functional groups out there for you to reach out to and get connected. But the most important thing is put yourself out there. There's a book, Paul, that I know we talked about. It's called The 20-Minute Networking Session.
Yep.
It's even for a slow reader like me, you can probably read it in a couple or 3 hours, but it talks to you about networking, but how to set up one of those sessions and to realize that you don't need an hour or an hour and a half. In 15 or 20 minutes, you can do what you need to do with that and establish that kind of relationship. So that's a great book to read and to help you through that networking process.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link to a lot of the people you just mentioned, and then the 20-minute networking book, and then the Go Giver book as well. So I think to kind of wrap up this topic on networking, if somebody's not a part of a job outplacement service like a Challenger, what, I guess maybe 1 or 2 things would you recommend to them to get started, or necessarily how to get started? Probably reading the 20-minute networking book would probably be a good first step.
It's a great first step. The important thing, I think if you simplify the process, the first thing is for you to understand this is a process, a grieving process, and to know that you have to close the door behind you before you can look at the doors and open those in front of you. So the first important thing is to come to grips with yourself and where you are, and get to a good place. Because if you try to go forward and you're still angry, no matter what you think, it's going to show up. Yeah. Just like when you go home, Paul, when you go home at night and you had a terrible day, you can open the door and Teresa, before you say a word, she'll go, oh, so you had a terrible day. So you
just happened yesterday.
You can't hide those things.
No,
so
the
first thing is to work through that. And the way you work through that is to talk to people that you know and care about. Okay. So that's the first thing. Work through that emotion part of it. And then as you do, try to think about this, not as oh God, ain't this awful, but you know what? Here's where I am. How do I make the best out of this? And it's the idea of trying to say, okay, maybe I was only with that company for a year, so maybe it wasn't the right company. Or maybe I was with the company for 20 years or 10, but is to take a breath and say, okay, with where I am now in my life, as far as experience, age, my family, what is it that I really want to do now? You're free to have some time to think about that. And as you think about, so that's really important to think about what it is I want to do next. And it's also important to go through the financial side of this. You know, Paul, if you know a good financial advisor, you know, it's probably not bad to talk to them. Okay.
I do know one.
There you go. But that's critical because you want to take an inventory of where you are. Okay. So now here's where I am. How long can I live the way I need to live without finding a job? And before I start dipping into my savings. And you should use that as the energy behind going forward. And truly, that's also important to then, with that financial advisor, to say, okay, from this point on, with what I want to have when I retire, what do I need to make? What do I need to make? And then the second question is, well, what would I like to make? Okay. And to me, those are critical goalposts.
Yep.
And then I would encourage you to look at any opportunity there is that fits between those goalposts. And that's really an important thing. And those goalposts, depending upon where you are, the numbers may be a lot smaller than they were when in your last job from that sense. So you want to free yourself up. I had a president of an auto company, couldn't get by. He just couldn't get over, where to go, what to do. And I said, well, have you had a business card made up? And he goes, no, I don't know what I want to do. And I said, well, let's take a breath. If you could open your mind and do what you want, what would you do? He said, well, I got an 84 Corvette in my basement for 20 years that I'm trying to restore. What I'd like to do is open up a Corvette custom shop. I said, can you do that financially? He said, yeah, I looked at the numbers. I said, why don't you do that? The next day he sent me a picture of a card that had the name of his Corvette shop open on it. So it's just a matter of freeing yourself. But so that's important. Then the next step is to take inventory, so to speak. You've taken financial inventory. So now it's to take inventory of what is it that I really love to do? Okay. What is it that I love to do? And then the second thing is to say, what is it that I'm really good at? And hopefully you're going to have some things that line up. So if you can find things that you love to do, that you're really good at, okay, then that's the ideal, the ideal job is defined as find something you love to do and get somebody to pay you to do that. All right. I mean, isn't that the ideal job?
Yes, that is.
You probably know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. I sure do.
So that's really critical. And the next step is to understand, which is a flaw that many people make, is to understand what makes you different for what you want to do. What makes you the same is not going to get you the job. It's what makes you different. That's what's going to get you the opportunity. So then finally, if you don't mind me saying, I think is to take a step back and to remember two simple things. There's only two reasons why someone's going to hire you. Just two. The first one is because they like you. They feel comfortable with you. They think they could trust you. They could enjoy working with you. So one of the most important things to do is to take inventory to be your best you. Not your best somebody else, but your best you. And in an interview process, this might sound terrible, and coming from my HR background, I've told a lot of people what I'm about to say, of which many didn't like it, but nobody disagreed. And that is, in an interview setting, in the first 5 to 10 minutes, the interviewer has made up their mind already whether you're going to go forward or not. And that's because of how they felt about you. Did you smile whenever you came in? Were you dressed appropriately? Did you not smell like you just took a perfume bath? okay, or that you've never taken a bath, okay? And did you reach out, and in old times, did you shake your hand, or maybe did you bump with a firm fist this time? Whatever it is, and so it's really important to make those first minutes with them to try to make it a dialogue and to do a little bit of research on the person to try to find ways to connect. The rest of the interview, typically, Paul, is designed to give them a chance to justify the decision they've already made, or you a chance to prove, save them from making a bad decision. But those first 5 to 10 minutes are critical. The second reason they're going to hire you is because you've done something they need to have done. And that's why it's important for you to do two things. To know what you're really good at and have that front of mind. And second thing, which is really tough for people looking for a job, is to know that listening is really important. Because if you're so doggone busy talking, you'll never let them tell you what's really important to them. So you've got to listen. And then when you hear what's important to them, then you have your stories front of mind that you can share what makes you different and how you've done what they need to have done. So really simple. They like you and you've done something they need to have done.
That's incredible. That was a lot of knowledge packed into a few minutes there. So that's incredible. One of the things I want to swing back to, especially on the finance side, because I think one of the things that, at least for me personally, I know talking to some other people that have gone through the Challenger program and worked with you, is that you've been where we are. You've gone through transition. And I think that's one of the things that helped connected us all together. And likewise, over the last 5 years through TAMA, I've worked with a lot of families that have gone through similar transitions with their jobs and doing that, financial inventory. And really, I think what you were getting to is defining what is enough. What is enough for our family financially and from a lifestyle standpoint? Because then it opens the door. Well, I never liked working in the auto industry, or I never liked working in tech, and I always wanted to open up my own business. And I've helped guide some people through that path, and I think they relate to me because I went that path. And I was gonna. I'll still save the bulk of my good story at towards the end of our conversation with you. But the phrase I will never forget is, you can only run from your destiny for so long. And when we started our relationship, you could tell that I had this burning desire to run TAMA full time. And it's a matter of figuring out how to do it. So we'll come back to that, because I want to kind of save that for the end. So let's transition into talking just high level about like the current state of the job market with COVID. And one of the things I know that you want to talk about, and me as well, because I was actually quoted in a CNBC article about this, is ageism. I'm seeing data where a lot of the people that have been let go or transitioned are on the older side. So talk to us about maybe what you're seeing in the job market, because I know obviously you're here in Metro Detroit, but you also look at trends nationwide. So talk to us a little bit about that, and then we can kind of transition into ageism.
Okay. So first of all, for a young guy like you, I'd like you to instead of saying old, I'd like you to say more experienced. Okay.
I got it. Usually I use the word mature.
More mature. There you go. That's perfect, Paul. So let me start with the job market, and you know me. One of my strengths is that I'm a consummate optimist, and one of my weaknesses is at times I'm a consummate optimist. Okay, but one of the things I really think is important is we have a higher percentage of our clients today, when we reach out to them, they say, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you, but you know what, Rich, the job market is so terrible. I'm not going to waste my time right now. I'm just gonna enjoy, relax, and maybe later look for an opportunity. And for me, I think that's the biggest mistake they can make as a person. Statistically, People are still finding good jobs right now. Okay. Number one, statistically, there are still a lot of jobs out there. I think we all know that at the height of the pandemic, as far as unemployment, we had 20 million people out of work. Okay, now there's less than 10 million. That's still a big number, but 10 million people found jobs. Okay, right. So we have people finding jobs every single month, whether it's in the Detroit area or it's nationwide. So the important thing to me right now from the job market is to go on the search, because there are opportunities, and the fact that other people are choosing not to go means by you being involved makes your probability higher of finding something. Okay, and what's really crazy in some respects, Paul, is I have customers, let's just say in the auto industry, okay, or in the healthcare industry, as two big industries. And I have customers in that same area. One customer is letting people go in that industry. The other customer is letting people go, and they're hiring each other's people they let go. And it's not because they're trying to trade up the same person. It's because the companies are rethinking their direction, and they're retooling so that a direction that one company is going is different than another. So they're hiring people from these other companies. So just because a company is letting folks go doesn't mean they're not hiring different kinds of people. So the first point is go and get active in the market. It's really important for two reasons. One is it'll help push you through the emotion of the job loss to get to a better place. And second of all, who knows? You could find a job. From that sense. The other point about the job market right now is companies, you got to think about it from a different perspective. Many companies are much more open to remote working that were never open to it. So right. I've had people at all levels in the organization, from a professional engineer to a president of a company, a CHRO, that are finding jobs in different states that the company is saying, you can stay right where you are. Just travel when you need to travel. And that would have never happened 2 years ago. So now, if you are in Michigan and you want to stay in Michigan, that doesn't mean you can't find a job. I talked to a young lady last month that works for a company that is based in San Francisco, and she lives in Royal Oak. Another company that's working for Facebook, she lives in Michigan. So there's opportunities now. The other point is a lot of companies are looking at this as an opportunity to hire people they couldn't hire before. So smaller companies are saying, you know what? Because these people are no longer working, there's a level of the talent pool that I couldn't persuade them to leave. But now that they're in the market, I can actually attract them. So the job market is not as dead as you might think. No, I'm not going to tell you the same numbers of people are finding jobs as they did in January of last year. But I can tell you there's a lot of people finding jobs. And it's if you believe that as the art of the possible, it'll only be possible if you go after it. So that's kind of my view on the market. Ageism, I wouldn't deny it. When I was on the market, I was in my 50s, and I'd say not that I'm an ancient now, but my age started with the 5, which is generally when people start to get concerned about age. I have clients, the age starts with a 7, and they're out there on the market. Not as many, but a lot start with the 5 and start with the 6. And I'll speak about this from two perspectives. When I was the HR leader of a company, we did a lot of hiring. And frankly, we didn't care how old somebody was. We cared how old they acted. So if you came to an interview and fell asleep, that probably wasn't a good sign whether you were 25 or 65. Or if you came to an interview and for some reason you forgot to turn your phone off and you flipped it open, that was never really a good sign. Or you came, as a lady and had bouffant hair, but the point is you were out of the times. The important thing that companies really care about is how old you act. And are you up to date with your discipline and the technology in your discipline? So for me, in my 50s, when I was looking for a job, I made sure, I had my iPhone and I took notes on my iPad. Now, I wanted them to see without me saying a word that I was plugged into what was going on from a technology standpoint. So the first thing about ageism is it's a really good excuse to say that's the reason I didn't get the job. In some cases, it may be. In my case, I was the first loser for a CHRO seat. And one of the main reasons the CEO told me confidentially was the team was in their early 40s and they wanted somebody that was the HR leader that was also one of their peers from a life standpoint that they felt they could connect better to. So there's going to be some cases where it's out there, but if you put your best foot forward, I would not avoid any part of the job market because I was concerned about ageism.
How do you
stop and take a breath? Go.
No, this is good. This is great. So how do you help, or how can an individual self-identify? So I always, throughout the conversation, I'm looking at this in two ways. A person that is working with somebody like Challenger that has an outplacement service, and then somebody that's completely on their own. How do I identify maybe the skills gap that I need? Because I think about like what's going on within the auto industry now, and this transition from gas to electrification, and the skills needed for that are different than skills needed before. And I think that's one of the things we haven't talked about, but I think is really important is, just because you may have a job today, but that job may not be there in 5 years or 10 years from now. And it's always, and I tell families I work with all the time with different industries and different careers, you've got constantly have to be updating your skill sets to make yourself continue to be valuable and to be able to continue to help solve problems that your company or firm needs. So, when there is a transition, you're still there.
So I think about that and you as a financial advisor, okay? If, for your clients, you're going to recommend that they continue to save and build their future, right?
Right.
So when you're working for a company, you want to continue to fill your toolkit while you're there. Just as you say, you want to continue to grow and stay current. So if you're in the market now, okay, so now you have a fresh chance as part of your criteria is to, instead of just accepting a position, it's select a position. And that is, as part of the process, you're not going to say, to a prospective employer, now it's my turn to interview you. Okay. You have to understand, which is the most difficult part. I believe the most difficult part of the job search process is you can't control the company's actions. You can only control your own. So what you want to be able to do as part of this discovery of the company is you want to be able to learn about their culture and how they think. So you want to make sure you get yourself in a situation that's going to be a continuous learning organization. That's either going to provide that internally to you or going to allow you to do it externally. And frankly, you have to remember you're responsible for you. So even if the company may not provide it, then it's your responsibility to go out and invest in yourself, whether it's webinars or it's different classes. But it's really critical because to me, the worst thing in the world is to work for a company because you feel like you can't find the same job or a better job somewhere else. So you want to continue to put yourself in a situation of growing and having the opportunity to learn, Paul.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when I got into the wealth planning financial service industry, that's one of the things that I really liked about it, is that it's continuing to change, especially with what I do with running a family office where there's wealth planning, portfolio management, and tax services all under the same umbrella. Well, everybody knows taxes are constantly changing. So there's always, what I've learned to love about this industry is the opportunity to continue to learn, grow, and develop. And especially because I work with, mainly families, but it's, as Tama's gotten bigger, the level of sophistication amongst my families have gotten different. So I'm working with a family that's just starting out, but I'm also working with somebody that's nearing retirement. And those are two different, planning scenarios. And then you're working with somebody that, is in retirement already. And that's yet another different scenario. So, but at the core, it's all about the family. I know I only have you for a finite amount of time. And there's two things I want to get to. My last closing question I ask all my guests, but before I get there, one of the things that, I kind of alluded to in our previous conversation, is talking about my story and the impact that you had on me. And I just want to go back to the one quote that I always remember you by, is that you can only run from your destiny for so long. And I know that every time, I see you, I always make sure to remind you that, and to, really tell you how much I appreciate the work that you did with me, the support that you offered. I know that you had me back, to speak to networking group, usually once every, year or something like that, which is, I'm always a huge fan to do, because, you gave so much to me during my time of transition, and the group of people that I met. And, again, I can't thank you enough for all of that support, that love, the tough love sometimes when I needed it. But, at the end of the day, besides, Teresa, of course, you're a big part of the success that Tama has had over these last 5 years, whether you realize it or not. So when I finally got you booked here on the show, I was really glad to be able to tell you that personally in our audience, and how much, you've meant to me over the course of the last 5 years, and in the continuation of our relationship. So, thank you, Rich. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. When I took this role with Challenger, and I want to use this phrase because a lot of people, that have been working for a while are looking for it. I think we all go through different phases of our life, and to me, this is kind of my third act in my career, if you will. And I decided I wanted to do something that I wanted to use the experience that I had in the past in a way different in the future, but I wanted to use it. And to me, what I wanted to do was to move this third act in my career from being moneyful to being meaningful. Okay. Not that I don't want some money. Okay. But the point is, the focus changes to really being meaningful. And it's working with people like yourself that, that really helped me continue to do what I'm doing. So thank you for those kind words. But what I want to say, though, to the folks, that if you have help and it's with someone other than Challenger, it's okay to work with Second Best. No, just kidding. If you have help from someone other than Challenger, you should use it to the very nth degree, because those folks are good people too, and they care. So you should use that to the full extent. Your company wanted you to have it, and you should work at getting, as Paul would tell you, a financial return, a payback on that investment the company has made. Secondly, if you're not working with somebody, there are so many amazing people out there that are willing to help you, either in a network setting. And if you talk to people, if you talk to your first line of network, I know that you'll come up with some folks that are going to be really willing to help you. One of the things I learned when I was in transition is that you certainly remember the people that helped you, and you certainly remember the people that didn't. Okay.
Very true.
And many times I was surprised about both. I got help from people that I kept saying, why are they helping me? Why is this person being so nice to me? But so the point there is, if you don't have help, between reaching out to your network and asking for help, attending networking sessions, there's a lot of stuff online. There's some great books to help you. And from that sense, people can reach out to me. I have a great partner that I'm working with here in Detroit, Heather Linds, and we probably spend 25 or 30% of our time helping people that aren't and will never be our clients. And that's one of the things I like about we have that freedom to help. So the idea is to take whatever you have and play hard with it.
Well, you are definitely a giver for sure, Rich. So my closing question that I ask all of my guests, and you can answer this from being a parent or being a grandparent, but what is the one thing that you love most about being either a parent or a grandparent in your situation?
Well, I happen to be both. I happen to be both. It's just, if I be really simple, it's the smile on my face when I look at how this young girl of mine, that when we would go places that were historic or something, I would say, do you remember that? And she would look at me and say, is it going to be on the test? Okay. To a woman that has been tremendously successful in life with two amazing children. And then I watch those children. It's really the smile that comes on my face. That's what I love most. And when my daughter, who I started coaching, now she's gracious enough, and my son, gracious enough to allow me to continue to coach, but they also coach me now. So it's that transition of the relationship that puts that smile on my face too.
Well, I think that is a fitting way to close up our conversation. Rich, I can't thank you enough for being on the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast, and I look forward to many conversations to come.
Thanks, Paul. Take care. God bless.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. Please visit tamacapital.com to subscribe to this podcast or to connect with certified financial planner and registered investment advisor Paul Fenner of Tama Capital. And please join us again next time on the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast.